Lori here. I'm back to do my September reading wrap up. This was a weird month. I will tell you. It started off super weird because of I was commuting for like a good portion of this month for my job. My school schedule, everything kept changing. We started planning to go back on one day and then it got pushed 2 weeks. Now we're kind of in the transitional phase of like going back this like upcoming Thursday, which is October 1st. But again, everything keeps changing. But I did wind up getting a I had a pretty good reading month. I felt like this month I was struggling with a couple of the books that I chose, and I think that's more to do with pacing, I'll be a little bit honest. Especially the fantasy books that I picked up, and you'll see it because I think I'm gonna split this video into two parts. I'm gonna see how long it is, and if it's over probably like 15 minutes each part, I'll probably wind up splitting it. Normally I do one wrap up, but since COVID started, I've been doing like two wrap ups because I've had so many books. So yeah, so let's get into it. The first book that I wound up finishing reading at the start of September was A Golden Fury by Samantha Coho. I'm on two separate blog tours for this book. But I actually wound up liking this book. I found the setting to be super interesting. You follow this main character, and her mother is an alchemist. And when you become an alchemist, it kind of leads you to become a little bit crazy. So she winds up getting sent away from her mother to go live with her father that she's never met. And it kind of sets her off on like an adventure. And I liked it. I thought it was an interesting concept. I thought the pacing was really interesting in that book specifically. Um, but I struggled a little bit with the characters, and I felt like it was a very much there was a lot of male characters in that read, and I just wanted a little bit more female characters to kind of connect with. I like the main character. I thought it was interesting. Romance was definitely not the focus, but I struggled a little bit with the pacing at points in that read, and I felt like the pacing was a little bit clunky. But I thought it was interesting. I like books that are set in like the past and how they deal with like a women's role in those societies because it's not necessarily common. I like the alchemist elements, and I like that book had a lot of like traveling elements. Like we went to a bunch of different like cities in that book. So I wound up giving that book like 3.5 stars. I liked it. It wasn't my favorite read, but I did wind up enjoying it. And I'll definitely wind up checking out the sequel when it comes out. And then the next book that I wound up picking up was an adorable listen, and that is You Should See Me in a Crown by Leah Johnson. I cannot say enough positive things about this book. I simply adored it. It was so fun. I thought that it had a nice balance between diversity, but also a coming of age story. But also, I like books that have like a competition element. So you have this young girl named Liz, and she learns at the start of the book that her dream school that she wants to go to, she didn't wind up getting accepted for a scholarship for its music program. She just didn't get accepted. She knows that due to her family situation, her mom recently passed away. She's living with her grandparents. Her brother has a I think he has like one of those he has like a chronic illness, and she knows that if she tells her parents will sell their house, and that will be the only way she can go to college. So she decides to run for prom queen in this super conservative town where LGBTQ is not a thing at all, and it's actually frowned upon. But oh my god, this book was adorable. I just really, really liked it. I thought it was a nice look into a black teenage girl living in the South and what they deal with. I love books that have a competition element. I thought the friendship dynamics were so well done. And it was like an important read for me. Like I thought the topics of racism and diversity was super well done. It reminded me a little bit of Becky Abertali and Alicia Syed in Yes, No, Maybe So, because again, they handle that topic so well. And I love books that have a competition element. I always like that. So I think the prom queen element was again great. I can't say enough things. Definitely go check out this book. It was definitely one of my favorite reads of the month by far. Definitely my favorite audiobook that I wound up listening to. And the next book I am going to chat about is I Hope You're Listening, which was another book that I wound up really. So this book I really wound up liking it. I'm actually on a blog tour for it, but it combines some of my favorite hobbies or things I like. I love true crime. I love mysteries. I love solving mysteries. I like mysteries, but I also like true mysteries based in real life. I'm a big fan of the show Disappeared, and I love listening to true crime podcasts because I just find it interesting. I think my favorite thing is when people just vanish and like there's no answers. So this book kind of follows this young girl, and when she was younger, her best friend wound up going missing, and she was kind of left in the aftermath of that story. Um, and to kind of, I think she was definitely feeling a little bit of guilt, a little bit PTSD about that experience. So she started this podcast that was like going to shine light on these missing person cases in hopes to get them solved. And that's the true crime stuff I like to watch because I do like to potentially help people, like say like, oh, I know that person's who you are and that should not have happened. And it kind of suddenly kinds up combining with her own past. And it was just really, really well done. There was aspects of a podcast that she did, and we got to see that, and it was just great. There's also always a very, very strong LGBTQ element in that book, which I found awesome. But it was just a fun, fast-paced read. Definitely a solid mystery thriller, and one that I would definitely recommend for the fall season, where it gets a little bit creepy. Thought the ending was a little bit rushed, but other than that, a really, really enjoyable read. And I definitely recommend that you guys check it out. It was definitely a thriller that probably one of my favorite thrillers that I read this year so far, definitely. But it was just one that really took the cake and had a lot of my favorite elements. And I also really like the main character as well. And then the next book I am going to chat about is a book that I actually have a copy of. And that is Today, Tonight, Tomorrow by Rachel Lynn Solomon. This is the Barnes & Noble book club pick for, I think, August. So there's a couple of YA contemporary tropes that I love. One of the tropes I love is books that have a competition, which I said with You'll See Me in a Crown, but also books that have a take place over 24 hours. And I love books set the summer after high school. So this book has all three. And I also love to hate romances. So this book was like calling my name. But it basically follows this character named Rowan and Neil. And they are constantly competing to be the best at everything in their high school. In the aftermath of that, one gets named valedictorian, one does not. And they have this game at the end of senior year called Howl, which is basically like Assassin. I used to play Assassin when I went to summer camp. And they have to go around Seattle, which I thought was awesome. And as someone who has been quarantine bound for about 6 months, anyone going anywhere and doing anything normal is perfect in a book. So it's like a combination of Howl, but also like a scavenger hunt. And I loved it. I fell headlong into the story. I read it in 2 days. It was amazing. And I also like books that have elements in between chapters that kind of accent the story or kind of give you more information about the past, because again, it takes place over 24 hours, but these characters have known each other for 4 or 5 years. There's also a lot of Jewish representation in this book, and I found that again to be really important. It's another type of character that, unless you're reading historical fiction, you don't really find Jewish characters, and I think that that's a very upsetting trend in literature. So I was happy that she was Jewish. They actually are both Jewish in this book, and I thought that was excellent. And Rowan's parents are writers, and she really wants to be a romance writer, but everyone is super critical of that, and it was great. I wound up giving it 5 stars. This was definitely a lighter read, I'll say. It did deal with some hard-hitting topics throughout, but definitely a lighter read. Her past 2 books are definitely hard-hitting, so I will definitely add those to my TBR for sure, but this one was perfect, and I really, really wound up enjoying it. And then the next book was kind of my say goodbye to summer, which I knew was happening. I was really, really emotionally sad about it. But Bookish and the Beast by Ashley Poston is the 3rd book in her Once Upon a Con series. This is a retelling of Beauty and the Beast, and this book, like that one, definitely is my favorite book of the month. I love this. I adored Geekerella. I like Princess and the Fangirl, but this one was just perfect. So the setup of this one is you follow Rosie Thorne and Vance Raines. Rosie lives in this small town, and she's just a small town girl. She, and one day she winds up encountering Vance Raines, who is in the Starflight series as the villain, his dog Sasha, and Sasha gets them both into a little bit of trouble when a Starfield flight book is destroyed by them. They have to work together to make amends, and I adored it. So perfect. Definitely on the shorter side. It wasn't that long of a read, but I really, really wound up liking it. Beauty and the Beast is totally one of my favorite retellings, and this book was definitely a step up from Princess and the Fangirl. I would have to reread Geekerella again to kind of compare, but they're definitely super fun, and I really hope we get another book in this series because I love Ashley Poston and how she really writes a book focusing on fandom and loving fandom, and this one was all about reading, and I love a good celebrity and girl next door romance because those are some of my favorites. So this book was definitely a high five for me. Chat through is actually Song Below Water by Bethany C. Morrow. A book that started my struggle with fantasy, I think, I'll be a little bit honest, and I felt like it was a solid story. Like, it had a good contemporary elements. I thought the fantasy elements for the siren and the mermaids were super interesting. But the mixing of these two stories, I think, made it feel a little bit flat to me, and I felt like I wasn't connected to either one of the characters. And I felt like because we did get both their point of views weren't distinct enough for me to be able to identify who was who. But I thought it had some really good diversity moments, and I found it to be super interesting. But I struggled a little bit with the pacing and with the world building when they were combined. I think that what she was trying to say about diversity was super interesting, and I liked her world building. But when you put them together, I think that they were a little bit too mismatched for my liking. And the contemporary world is definitely more urban fantasy, and I felt just a little bit lost in the details. But I will definitely read more by her in the future. I just felt like the mismatch of these two types of world just was a little bit too confusing for me. But I wound up giving it 3 stars, and I definitely liked the diversity elements, and I thought the story was interesting. I just struggled a little bit with the pacing and the world building. And then the next book I am going to chat through is, this was another one that I wound up really, really liking, and it's The Unstoppable Wasp by Sam Maggs. Massive Marvel fan. I definitely prefer Marvel to DC, so it's really, really funny that I have not read any tie-in novels through the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but this is the one that I wound up picking up because I'm in the middle of reading a couple of Sam Maggs nonfiction books. This book was adorable. She's a very, very big science proponent, Sam Maggs, so I like that this book had a lot of fun facts about that were kind of littered through, but you basically follow this young girl, and she is the Unstoppable Wasp. She is the daughter of Hank Pym, who's has died in this book. But she also is a former person who was in the Red Room, which is the Black Widow program. And she winds up having a collection of found family, and they wind up creating this place to work together on both scientific problems, but also like global problems. And it was just a delight to read. I thought that the mystery that they were trying to solve about android tech, like robot tech, was really interesting. It reminded me of a couple of plot twists I have seen in another a DC movie, but again, plot points in superhero movies tend to be a little bit similar. But I thought it was great. I definitely will read more by her, like, physically writing, because most of the stuff I've read from her is, like, nonfiction. But it was great. I thought that it had a very, very strong tie-in to, like, science and STEAM for girls and why that's important. It also had so many strong female friendships, which I thought were great. And I wound up really, really liking it, and I wound up giving it 4 stars. So it was a delight, and you should definitely wind up picking it up. And then the next book I'm going to chat about in this video is the last book that I will chat through, I think. And that is Wire and Nerves, Volume 1 by Marissa Meyer. This is a graphic novel that's set directly after winter, and it kind of follows Aiko as she is helping Cinder set the world on straight. And Aiko is the main character, but you do see all the other Cinder characters in some capacity, and it was a delight. I really wound up liking this book. It was such a joy to read. I love being back with the people of the Rampion in different ways. I love seeing Aiko as a main character. Aiko is a little robot that basically comes into her own in the Lunar Chronicle series. But I also really like this. She's at the end of winter, small spoilers, there is a group of like medically engineered wolves that are just abandoned on Earth because their creator has been killed. So Aiko is working with Cress and Cinder and the rest of the gang to kind of bring them all up. But when a new villain comes into power, they all have to team up together to save the day. And I wound up really, really liking this one. But yeah, so I think I'm gonna wrap up this video. I'm gonna see how long it is. I'm gonna wrap up this wrap up, and I will do a second part that you will see later in the week. I'm gonna have to film eventually those parts like later, so that's why I'm gonna split this up. But definitely for me, I would definitely say that the first half of the month I read a lot of strong books. I read Bookish and the Beast. I read You'll See Me in a Crown. I read Today, Tonight, Tomorrow. I read Wire and Nerves, Volume 2. So I definitely had a lot of strong reads in the first half of the month that weren't fantasy. And normally when I go back to school, I start reading fantasy, and I think I just jumped in a little bit too quick. But I will see you for my next wrap up at the end in early October, and I hope you guys are doing well. Let me know in the comments what were some of your favorite reads of the month, and I'll talk to you guys later.